What is going on, everyone? If you saw my thumbnail, you'll see what I'm going to be talking about in this video. And it was all based on this post that I saw on the comic book collecting subreddit. If you don't follow the comic book collecting subreddit, I highly recommend it. There's always some fun stuff on there, but every once in a while, there's a very interesting topic that comes up. And this one really caught my attention. I actually laughed out loud when I read this because it is such a perfect example of what I see out there when it comes to people saying that they won't grade a book, that they'll never grade, that they don't believe in it, that it's a scam, whatever, until they want to grade one of their books for whatever reason, to sell it so that their family can sell it. So they can, usually it's not for presenting. It's generally going to be because it's a higher dollar book and they want to sell it. And, when they do it, it's all of a sudden acceptable, but any other time, it's a terrible thing. And that, it's looking down on grading and all that kind of stuff. This isn't a video about me trying to defend or push CGC or CBCS or anything like that. It's just this is a video about the hypocrisy of this. Now, I'm not trying to, mock this person or anything like that. I just thought that this was a very useful post to talk about this subject. So what the post says here is, in rebagging some of my books, I just noticed some damage to the rear corner of this issue. I don't believe in slabbing books, but I am tempted with this one. So if you don't believe in slabbing books, why would you slab it? Why in this case is it acceptable to get this book graded if you are someone that doesn't believe in grading? If you don't believe in grading, don't get the books graded. It's that simple. But if you think that there's actually value to grading, meaning it makes it so it's easier to sell your higher dollar book, identify restoration, that kind of thing, there's a value to it. That's what people see in grading. Now, I know some people will get all angry about, the 9.8s, 9.9s, modern grading, all that kind of stuff. Who cares? I mean, that's all I have to say about that. It's like, who cares? If other people like to get their modern books graded and like buying 9.9s and 9.8s and collecting that stuff, let them. Why does it matter? Why do you think that you have to tell other people how they're going to collect? But that is not necessarily what this is about. This is about a little bit of hypocrisy, and that don't believe in slabbing, but tempted with this one. Now, the other thing, the reason why this one really caught my attention was because this was such a perfect example. I mean, it really is when we get into the pictures. And if you're not familiar with this book, it is not Spider-Man #1, the regular issue. This is actually the Platinum edition. It's that one that if you were growing up when I was, and these books were coming out, you might be lucky enough to see it at your LCS. But most people just didn't even get a chance to see one. I don't think I ever saw one. It was an expensive book then, and it's an expensive book now. For example, if we take a look at GPA and, we go up here to like a 9.8, the most recent 9.8 sale for a platinum edition was $4,400 in May of this year. I mean, it's an expensive book. It really is. Even this book, which I estimate is probably somewhere around a 7 or a 7.5 based on the pictures. This is, let's see, a 7.5 sold in May for $359. So even in a lower condition like this, it's still a pretty expensive book. But why do I think that this was just a perfect example for this? So one, it's a more expensive book, and that's why the person wants to get it graded. I am guessing to eventually sell it for some reason. That would be the reason why I think they'd want to get it graded. If it's for presentation, then all the more reason that they shouldn't be against grading. If it's for presentation, why are you against grading at all? That's one thing I really like about slab books. I think they look good on a shelf in the slabs. But let's take a closer look at this picture here. And when we go to the back, this killed me. This is what made me really laugh out loud. See this corner here where that damage is? That is color touch with a Sharpie. And this poster was not aware of it. When I went through these pictures, I saw that immediately. I was like, oh my God, there's color touch on this book. And when you go into the comments, they did not realize there was color touch on this book. They found out when someone in the comments told them. So this means one of two things. Either this person did it themselves, which I highly doubt because they said they didn't know it, or someone sold them this book at some point touched up and they didn't catch it. And so they paid whatever that full price was for an unrestored copy, probably thinking that this book was maybe like a 9.2, 9.4, whatever candidate. But instead, it's at best going to probably be a 7 or 7.5 if you have that color touch removed, because now you're going to have to scrape all that off. It is going to be a pretty big blemish on that book. And so all the more reason on why there is value to something like grading, CGC, CBCS, whatever. Because with that, with a higher dollar book like this, especially, you have that impartial third party, however you feel about it, that has looked at this book, and I guarantee you they would not miss this. I mean, like, I saw this in a second. I guarantee you this would not get missed. And then you would have to, you pay to have the restoration removed or whatever you're going to do. But that would have caused a lot less problems now for this person, because they probably wouldn't have bought it in the first place then, or they would have gotten it for a lot less. So just something to think about, that not only is this showing that this person who says that they would never grade books would grade this because it is a high dollar book, also got ripped off by someone that touched up the book and they didn't know it. Whereas if it had been in a slab, if it had been graded, it would have been caught. So just a couple things, to think about there. I don't know. I just think it's so crazy, because I see all the comments, when I make these videos and I talk about CGC, I see all the hateful comments that are in there, about grading, about CGC, it's a scam, whatever. And then all of a sudden it's acceptable when you have a high dollar book. Like, I mean, come on, guys. But if you're not familiar with, that Spider-Man #1, this is just, they posted a picture as well of all their copies. I think the only one that this is missing is the gold UPC, the Walmart one. But otherwise, I think that's all the versions of that cover. I'm not certain, but I think that's all the versions of that cover. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about in this video, because I knew that this would be kind of like a short little thing and I'd get maybe a lot of angry comments in this one. I don't know. We'll see. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was just this post here. There's always a couple good ones that I like to talk about from the comic book collecting subreddit. I thought this was an interesting topic. And it was, do you always buy the highest grade you can afford? And, there's all kinds of, different responses to this about what people think. And so, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you always buy the highest grade you can afford? But the other thing that I thought was an interesting angle for this post was that I think a lot of people have this idea that the more expensive version of the book is a better investment. Like, if you're approaching this from the investment perspective. And the reality is that that's just not really true all that often. Now, sometimes it might be, but on average, what I see is that a lot of times the most expensive version of the book actually tends to go up a little slower than the more affordable version of the book, the book that more people have access to. But I thought I would use an example of this with Amazing Spider-Man 300. So Amazing Spider-Man 300, first appearance of Venom. We'll just kind of I can show you that that cover here. We've got this great Todd McFarlane cover, first appearance of Venom, all that kind of stuff. A book that went crazy during the comic boom, has corrected quite a bit. It was also a very focal book in the whole comic book reholdering scam, because that person reholdered a bunch of them. But the interesting thing with this book, and it's not just this book, but I thought I would talk about it because there are so many sales, you can have a pretty good look at the data, is that I thought I would look at the price change in this book from 2010 until now. And we'd look at a 9.8, a 9.6, and a 9.2, just so you get a little bit of a variety of the grades and some pretty big ranges in price. So when we look at the 9.8, and what I did was I took 2024 and I took all the sales from April on and I averaged them. And the 9.8, that went for $2,912. So for the last approximately 2 months, the average price has been $2,912. Then I went down to 2010, and I just did the full year for 2010. Now, there are probably going to be some newsstands sprinkled in here that maybe didn't get identified correctly, like maybe this one was a newsstand. But for the most part, it gives us a pretty good idea because so many copies of this book sell. You can handle a few outliers in the price. The average price for a 9.8 in 2010 was $610. So if you divide 2,912 by 610, you get 4.8. So this book has gone up 4.8 times in the last 14 years. So 2010 until now. So now let's take a look at a 9.6. So if we go to a 9.6 and we look at the current prices from April until now, and so again, I mean, just so many copies of this book sell. The average price for the last 2 months was $941. Now, if we go down to 2010 and we do the full year again, and again, I mean, look how many of these sell. I mean, just so many. And this is just the ones that are recorded into GPA. But the average price here was $200. And so if you divide 941 by 200, you get 4.7. So with the 9.8 went up 4.8 times, 9.6 went up 4.7. I mean, close enough, like basically the same. And you spent 3 times less for the book. So if you can't afford that 9.8, you're still getting the same return, long-term return on your money for this book. The last one that I thought I'd look at was a 9.2. And so with a 9.2, if we look at the current average for the last 2 months, basically since April, the average price, $550. Actually, the last sale here and a few other sales in there. So average price for the last couple months has been $550. If we go back to 2010, the average price across all of 2010, and again, a bunch of sales, was $109. Some higher, some lower. So some people, did a lot better. And when you divide 550 divided by 110, you get 5. So actually, in terms of return on investment, the 9.2 did better than the 9.8, which was 4.8, and the 9.6, that was 4.7. Now, in reality, like within error, they're probably all approximately the same. What I'm showing is that if you're looking at comics as an investment, and I know that always bothers some people, I'll have comments in my comment section where, people just say comics should never be investments and all this kind of stuff. And it's like long-term trends have shown otherwise, that they're actually pretty reasonable investments for the right books. Run filler, maybe not so much. But for the right books, reasonable investments. I mean, this is a book this is even after all the correction that's happened. I mean, it's getting pretty far back down to approximately probably where it should be. I mean, it might go down a little more, but even so, this was a $610 book 14 years ago. It's now a $2,900 book. I mean, 5 times your money in 14 years is pretty good. I don't know if that would hold out long term. It's still pretty good. So just the point here was that if you're looking at this from an investment perspective, maybe don't get hung up too much on the grade. Just try to get good books. Like that's really what you should be looking for if you're looking at this from the investment side. You want to get good comic books, the key books, first appearances, popular books that people like to buy. Those tend to be the ones that have those traditional upward trends. Now, obviously, I cannot guarantee any type of long-term trend. Anything can happen. People could all of a sudden start hating comic books, and the concern that people have about people aging out and then the younger generation not wanting to buy these collectibles. I mean, that's always possible. That can happen. So there are risks out there, just like there's risks in anything that you're purchasing for an investment purpose. But my point here was just that you don't necessarily have to worry about having that 9.8. You could get a 9.6 or a 9.4 or even a 9.2, where from about 5 feet away, you probably will not be able to tell the difference if you just covered up the grade. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. Had some, I don't know, I thought these were interesting topics to talk about. This one, because I've thought about that for a bit, and I thought about talking about it with the grade stuff and the pricing and the return on investment for books. And I think that this just kind of shows you that you can buy the lower grade books and they will still appreciate similarly to the higher grade books. So it's more important to try to find a good presenting copy, just that book that you want, and not worry as much about the grade. And then, of course, CGC, it's a scam, ripping people off, unless I can make some money on it. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that like button, subscribe button, notification bell, all that kind of stuff. And I will see you in the next video.